My name is Nora. I live in Columbus, Ohio, with my two children, Maddie, who's 9, and Liam, who just turned 6. For a long time, my life wasn't anything extravagant, but it was filled with love. My husband Jason worked in construction, long hours, tough work, but he always came home with a smile and enough energy to scoop the kids into his arms like they were the best part of his day. And they were. We didn't have a big house or expensive vacations, but we had late-night pancakes, messy living rooms full of toys, and bedtime stories that turned into giggles. Jason and I shared a rhythm. He worked full-time while I worked part-time as a billing assistant at a local clinic so I could be there for school pickups, doctor's appointments, and all the little things that make up a childhood. Jason was my partner in every sense of the word. When the kids got sick, he was the one running to Walgreens at midnight. When I had a bad day, he'd bring home chocolate and tell me dumb jokes until I laughed. He never once made me feel like I wasn't enough. The only friction came from his family, particularly his mother, Carol. From the beginning, Carol never truly accepted me. She'd smile in front of Jason but gave me cold stares when he wasn't looking. She used to make comments like, "You really should go back to work full-time," or, "Jason always needed someone who could keep up with him." I learned to let it roll off my back, for Jason's sake. Then there was Brenda, his older sister. She was sharper, more passive-aggressive. She once suggested that Maddie looked nothing like the family, and asked me in front of everyone if I was sure Liam wasn't too much for me to handle. Jason always brushed it off, told me not to let them get to me, and reminded me that we were building our own family. And we were. I didn't realize then just how fragile that peace was. Because when you lose someone who holds everything together, everything starts to shake. And I had no idea how much shaking was coming. It was a Friday morning, clear skies, birds chirping, one of those deceptively peaceful days. Jason kissed me on the forehead before heading to work like he always did. He ruffled Liam's hair and hugged Maddie a little longer than usual. I remember joking, "You act like you're going off to war," and he just smiled and said, "Better safe than sorry." That was the last time I saw him. Around noon, I got a call from his coworker. At first, I didn't even understand what he was saying. Something about an accident, about an ambulance. My heart dropped. I grabbed the kids, rushed to the hospital, barely able to breathe. By the time I got there, Jason was gone. They told me the scaffolding gave way. He fell 3 stories. They tried everything, but he died on impact. I remember standing in that sterile white hallway, clutching Liam to my hip and Maddie's hand in mine, as the world spun and collapsed around me. I couldn't cry, not yet. My kids were watching. Maddie asked, "Mom, what does this mean?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. The days after were a blur. People came and went, dropping off casseroles, whispering condolences, avoiding eye contact. Carol acted as if she was the widow, arranging the funeral like it was her duty, barely speaking to me unless it was to criticize. "You should have told him not to go to that site," she muttered once, blaming me under her breath. Brenda stood by her side, arms crossed, looking at me like I'd failed some invisible test. Not once did either of them ask me how I was doing. Their grief felt performative, like a show for others. Mine was quiet, suffocating, and private. Every night I locked myself in the bathroom just to scream silently into a towel. I tried to stay strong for the kids. I had to explain to Liam, who kept asking when Daddy was coming home, that he wasn't. I had to sit with Maddie when she refused to eat and said she hated God for taking him. I didn't blame her. The life we built was shattered in a single moment, and I was expected to carry on as if I wasn't bleeding inside. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't imagine, was that Jason's death wouldn't be the end of the pain. It was only the beginning. A few weeks after the funeral, when the casseroles stopped coming and the texts slowed down, reality hit harder than ever. The house was quieter, colder. Maddie had started sleeping in my bed, while Liam had nightmares almost every night. I was barely sleeping, barely eating, but I was surviving. For them. Then one Sunday afternoon, Carol and Brenda showed up unannounced. I opened the door in sweatpants and an old hoodie, hair a mess, eyes tired. Carol looked me up and down and said, "You look overwhelmed." Not exactly a greeting. They sat down in the living room like they owned the place. Brenda crossed her legs, took a slow sip of coffee I hadn't even offered, and looked me straight in the eye. "We're concerned," she said. "About the kids." I blinked. "Concerned? About what?" Carol chimed in, "You've lost a husband, Nora. You're grieving. You're barely holding it together. And we've noticed the children seem unsettled." I felt my stomach turn. Of course they're unsettled. Their father just died. Brenda leaned in, lowering her voice like she was trying to sound compassionate. "We just think they might do better, staying with us for a while. Just until you get back on your feet." It took me a second to realize what they were suggesting. My heart raced. "They're not going anywhere," I said quietly. Carol's tone changed immediately. "Don't be stubborn. Jason would have wanted what's best for the kids. He always said family comes first." I stood up, my legs were shaking, but I forced myself to speak clearly. "I am their family." Brenda stood too. "You might want to rethink that. Courts don't look kindly on unstable environments, and from what I can see," she gestured around the cluttered living room, "this isn't exactly ideal." They left shortly after, but not before Carol gave me a long, lingering stare at the door. "We'll be in touch," she said, like some kind of warning. I stood there after they left, heart pounding, hands trembling. For a moment, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just grief talking. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That visit wasn't out of concern. It was a threat. And they weren't done. It came in a plain white envelope. No warning, no knock on the door, just lying there in my mailbox like an ambush. I opened it with shaking hands. My stomach dropped as I read the words. "Petition for temporary custody. Filed by Carol and Brenda." They weren't just bluffing. They were really trying to take my children. The petition said I was emotionally unstable, financially incapable, and unfit to provide a secure home environment. They included photos, ones I never knew they'd taken, of me in pajamas, looking exhausted, the house messy, Liam crying in the background. They even listed my part-time income, suggesting I couldn't support the kids without Jason. I sat on the floor and cried until I couldn't breathe. I wasn't perfect. I was grieving. But I loved my children more than anything in this world. And now, I was being painted as a danger to them? I couldn't afford a lawyer. Every dollar was going toward groceries, gas, and the mortgage. I called 3 firms. None would take the case without a hefty retainer. Just as I was about to give up, I found a local nonprofit that offered legal aid for single mothers. That's where I met Diane. Diane was tough, straight-talking, no nonsense. She listened to me cry through our first meeting and then said, "They think you're easy to push. Let's prove them wrong." She helped me gather evidence. Photos of the kids smiling, healthy meals I made, school records, teachers' statements, letters from neighbors. I wasn't some negligent wreck. I was a mother doing her best in the worst situation. Still, the fear never left me. Every time I saw a car slow down in front of our house, I thought it might be someone coming to take Maddie and Liam. I started double-locking the doors, barely sleeping. Maddie sensed it. One night she whispered, "Are they going to take us, Mommy?" I held her close and said no. But deep down, I wasn't sure. The court date was set for 3 weeks later. Every day felt like walking a tightrope above a pit of knives. Carol and Brenda had money, influence, and a slick lawyer. I had my truth, and Diane. And I had my children. I wasn't going to lose them without a fight. The first time I walked into the legal aid center with Diane, I felt small. Like the weight of everything, Jason's death, the custody battle, the fear, was pressing down on my shoulders. But Diane kept reminding me, "You're not powerless. You're a mother. That means something." She was right. I had lost so much, but I hadn't lost my fight. Diane and I spent days preparing. We pulled together every piece of my life that proved I was capable and loving. I took pictures of Maddie's drawings on the fridge, recorded our bedtime routines, and even asked her teacher to write a letter about her progress in school since Jason's passing. The most powerful piece? A video I found on my phone. Jason, just a few months before he died, filming me making breakfast while the kids danced around the kitchen. His voice behind the camera. "They're lucky to have you. You know that? You're the heart of this house." Every time I played it, I cried. But I knew I'd need that strength in court. At the same time, I joined a support group for widowed moms. It was hard at first, walking into a room full of strangers and admitting I was drowning. But it became my anchor. These women knew exactly what I was going through. They didn't pity me. They saw me, and they reminded me I wasn't alone. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since college. Late at night, after the kids were asleep, I'd sit with a notebook and pour out every fear, every bit of rage, and every ounce of love I had left. It wasn't just for me. It was for Maddie and Liam. They needed a version of me that hadn't given up. Carol and Brenda, meanwhile, kept pushing. I heard through the grapevine that they were gathering their own witnesses. Old neighbors, former co-workers of Jason, anyone who might say I wasn't fit. One even claimed, I once forgot Liam at daycare for an hour, which, okay, happened once, when I had a fever of 102 and completely lost track of time. I wasn't perfect, but who is? I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to show I was present, loving, safe. Diane told me. Family court isn't about who has the nicest house. It's about who shows up for the kids day in and day out. And that was me. I was ready to tell my story, not just for the judge, but for my children. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before the sun. My stomach was in knots and I couldn't eat. Maddie and Liam were still asleep, curled up together on the couch. I kissed their foreheads and whispered, I'll fight for you. I promise. Deanne picked me up an hour later. She looked sharp and calm, like nothing could rattle her. I, on the other hand, could barely keep my hands from shaking. You've got this, she told me. Just tell the truth. Let them see who you really are. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Carol and Brenda were already there, sitting straight and smug, flanked by their polished attorney. They didn't even look at me. I felt invisible, like I didn't belong in the room where people were deciding the fate of my children. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense attitude, entered and got right to the point. Brenda went first. She painted a picture of me as emotionally unstable, unable to care for the kids, living in chaotic conditions. She even mentioned the time I forgot to pick up Liam from daycare, twisting it into a pattern of neglect. Then Carol spoke. Her voice trembled, tears carefully timed as she said, Jason always worried Nora wasn't coping well. He would have wanted us to step in. I wanted to scream. Jason never said that. If anything, he defended me constantly from their judgment. Then it was my turn. I stood up, knees weak, palms sweating. But then I looked toward Diane, and I thought of Maddie and Liam, waiting for me, needing me. I took a deep breath and spoke. I told the judge the truth. About Jason, about our life, about the grief that doesn't follow a neat timeline. I explained how I was managing things, even when it was hard. I admitted to my mistakes. Yes, I forgot pickup once. Yes, I looked tired in those photos. But I was present. I was showing up. I was loving my kids through the hardest season of our lives. Diane presented the school reports, the teacher letters, the video of Jason praising me, and statements from neighbors who had seen me juggle everything with love and care. Then the judge turned to Maddie, who had been appointed a child advocate. The room went silent. The advocate said Maddie expressed clearly that she feels safe with her mom. She wants to stay with her mom. She loves her grandma and aunt, but she doesn't want to live with them. That moment broke me open. Carol and Brenda stiffened, realizing their grip was slipping. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, she said. I'll be issuing my decision shortly. I walked out of that courtroom shaky but proud. Because I had spoken, and someone had finally listened. 3 days after the hearing, I got the call. I was in the kitchen, making toast for the kids before school, when my phone buzzed. It was Diane. My hands shook as I answered. The judge ruled in your favor, she said, her voice calm but firm. Full custody remains with you. Their petition was denied in full. I dropped the butter knife right onto the floor and sank into the nearest chair. Maddie looked at me from the table, concerned. Mom? What's wrong? I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. Nothing's wrong, I said. Everything is right. I hugged them both so tightly that morning. We were still a small, grieving family, but we were whole. Safe. Together. The written ruling arrived that afternoon. The judge had written, while the petitioner's concerns appear to stem from grief and familial tension, the evidence strongly supports that the respondent provides a stable, loving, and attentive home. I read that line 3 times. I wasn't just good enough. I was recognized as the mother my kids needed. Carol and Brenda didn't contact me directly after the ruling, but a week later I got a text from an unknown number. "You've made a mistake. You'll regret shutting us out." I stared at the message for a long time, then I deleted it. They no longer had power over me. I didn't stop Maddie and Liam from seeing their grandma or aunt if they ever wanted to, but I made it clear that visits would happen on my terms, in my home, with boundaries. They chose not to show up. That was their choice. Mine was to protect my children, emotionally and legally, from anyone who treated their mother like a threat instead of their shield. I found new strength after that. I started working full-time at the clinic. I enrolled in night classes online for medical billing certification. We downsized into a smaller home closer to school and my job. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. There were still hard days. I still missed Jason so much it hurt. There were nights I cried quietly after the kids fell asleep. But now those tears weren't for fear, they were just part of healing. And I knew in my bones that Jason would be proud of me. Proud that I stood up. Proud that I didn't let them take away the only thing he left behind, his children. Our children. It's been a year since that court ruling. A year since I stood in front of a judge and refused to let grief define me. A year since I reminded the world, and myself, that being a mother means showing up, even when everything is falling apart. Our life now looks very different than it did before. The house we live in is smaller, but warmer. There are drawings taped to the fridge, a calendar full of soccer games and parent-teacher conferences, and the constant hum of laundry, dishes, and laughter. I still miss Jason every day. That hasn't changed. Some mornings I reach across the bed, half asleep, and forget for a moment that he's not there. But I've learned how to keep living without letting go of him. He's still part of our family, just in a different way. Maddie's in 5th grade now. She writes stories in a pink notebook and wants to be a teacher when she grows up. Liam just lost his first tooth and insists he's basically an adult. They are thriving. And that, more than anything, tells me I did the right thing. Sometimes I think back to that moment, Carol and Brenda sitting in my living room, telling me I wasn't enough, that I couldn't do it, that my grief made me unfit. And I think, maybe that was the moment I finally found my spine. Because I did do it. I raised my children through the storm. I held them when the world felt cruel. I kept them safe when no one else believed I could. And through it all, I didn't just survive. I grew. I've started helping other women now. I volunteer once a week at the same legal center where I met Diane. I sit across from mothers who feel like the world is closing in on them, and I get to say, "You're stronger than you think." Because I know they are. We're not perfect. We still have cereal for dinner some nights. There are days when I lose my patience or forget picture day or cry in the shower. But perfection was never the goal. Love was, safety was, showing up was. And I'd done all of that. If Jason could see us now, I think he'd smile. He'd tease Maddie about her dramatic stories, chase Liam around the yard, and pull me into one of those hugs that made everything feel okay. But even though he's gone, I carry his love with me every day. And with that love, I've built something stronger than fear. A home